Well, it's been widely reported about the impact social media can have on self-esteem, especially for teenagers. But this afternoon, we're talking about something called Snapchat dysmorphia.
All right, joining us around the table to talk about this, Dr. Sabrina Fabi. What is this?
I know, and so these researchers at Boston University School of Medicine actually just published this in JAMA Facial Plastic Surgery, and that they're seeing patients come in more and more requesting to look like a filtered version of themselves. Now we know with Snapchat and with other Instagram, you can basically put cartoon figures and widen your eyes, smoothen out your skin, and make your lips look bigger, but sometimes the anatomy of our face, what we were born with, doesn't lend to have a bigger eye or to have a bigger lip without looking silly. And so people are now coming in actually wanting to pay to have these procedures performed so that they can look like the filtered version of themselves on Instagram.
This seems so, like, I can't even wrap my brain around this. First of all, Snapchat, I feel like, is for anybody who's like under the age of 20. I don't know really a lot of people older than that, maybe mid-20s that are, I'm like really dating yourself. I mean, we're only 29 here, but I just don't know a lot of like our group of friends who are using Snapchat. Not to say that they don't, but I wonder if this is like really a thing. Like, are you seeing this in your practice? And really someone's like, oh, I want to have all these filters and that's how I want to look?
Well, that's the thing. We start to have an altered perception of reality if all you're doing is taking selfies of yourself and posting them online. And so people become fixated on what they post online and that version of themselves versus the real version of themselves. And so I do commonly have patients that come in. I usually give them a mirror to tell them to point out the flaw, but in fact they turn around and give me their phone and tell me this is what I dislike. Now obviously when you take a photo of yourselves, it's a little bit different than what you may necessarily see in the mirror or what you or I perceive when we look at each other, because we're globally looking at each other, not that perceived flaw like the tip of the nose or how everted the lip may be. And so those are the things that you're capturing when you're just looking at a photo, and then when you're able to alter it by making the lip a bit bigger, then you start wanting to chase that.
Just tell people to take every photo with a filter and they'd be happy. I don't know.
So, well, plastic surgery's been happening for a long time. That's not something new. Snapchat's relatively new, of course. Instagram's been around. Is this just a different version of what we've seen for the last few years and then even more years beyond that in different ways?
Well, there's a 42% increase. In one study, they found a 42% increase in people coming in to do certain cosmetic procedures in 2015 based on selfies. By 2017, just 2 years later, this increased to 55%. So there's been a 17% increase in just 2 years of the requests people are having based on just photos of themselves. Why? Because these images make your nose 30% bigger. So there's actually an effect that it has that we don't necessarily see when we're just looking at ourselves in a mirror.
So do you then adjust when someone comes in and says, hey, Dr. Fabi, I want to make my nose smaller, or adjust it, and you're like, no, actually the camera is doing that. You're fine. Right,
because if you start engaging in it, something that I just recently wrote about is something called perception drift, in that if you do chase it, then that person quickly will, the new baseline of themselves, their brain quickly processes, and now it's that face with the bigger lip. And so then they forget that that wasn't the face that they once had. So 2 weeks later, the same person that came in wanting to look natural is now asking for more and more. And so that is what we're calling perception drift. And slowly you keep chasing the next flaw and the next flaw, and before you know it, the person is unrecognizable. So I think it really comes down to, having doctors that are going to be honest, look at before and after photos of the person and kind of make sure that you keep people on track as far as looking natural and not really getting off course.
This is you, this is your body, and by the way, you're going to age and you're going to get wrinkles
and things happen.
And use a filter.
You guys won't.
Yeah.
I will.
Good point, Andrew. You're right.
Because ultimately it's contributing to an increase in depression.
Right.
And so people that are on social media platforms for greater than 5 hours have been found to even have suicidal ideation.
I mean, it's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
Dr. Fabi, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.